Hi, Rachel.
Awesome. Hi. So before I start, I do have to introduce you to someone, Mike. This is Ben Wyatt the cat. We call him Benji. Um,
Incredible.
he he met Adam Scott during Party Down Press, and so I was like, well, he has to meet Mike Schur too. He doesn't care, but I do. But
Ben, it's nice to meet you. Good
he needs
work.
he wants to be gone instantly. But the it's very exciting talking to you guys today because I think what I love about Primo is so much about what I love about like Parks and Rec is my favorite show of all time, and those comedies have this like very genuine love for their characters, and you can tell that when you're watching it. And Primo has that energy, and so Shay, I wanted to know for you when you're writing these characters that are so distinct and they're making comments and references to each other, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense for this family. How do you keep those characters so kind of original and individual in their own ways while still making it a cohesive family?
I think you sort of accidentally answered that question yourself. That's a Mike Schur trick, which if any of his shows, they all do the same thing. He has this really remarkable ability to make characters that are completely separate of one another, but then they snap together like to form Ultron or what Megatron or whatever. You know what I mean? Like they
Yeah.
just they create. It's like one of those. The sum of the parts is the sum is greater than the parts, or however you say that thing. But that's like a thing that he's really really good at. So when we were making the show, he would talk about okay, they all have to have these personalities, but they all need to feel like they're going in the same direction all the
Mhm.
time. They should all want the same thing, which is for life to be better for every single person in the family, but they should all have different ideas on how to achieve that. And if you can do that, then it becomes when they argue with one another, you never feel like they don't like each other. You feel like, oh, they like each other a great deal. They're just arguing about how to get the rock to the top of the mountain. They all want it
Mhm.
up there. They just don't know the best way to do it.
Yeah, that's a great way. Like, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass, Mike. I'm so sorry, but like, you do make my favorite shows on this planet. And so the minute I saw that Primo, like, you were involved in it anyway, I was like, oh, I know Shay's name. I'm so excited. Like, I want to watch this show instantly. And then got halfway through my screeners and was like, I got to keep going, but I can't. Like, I have to leave. I want to like keep watching the show. For you though, is like when you are coming at it from more of like a producing standpoint and helping create get a show up and on the air, what do you look for in a comedy that like clicks for you as a creative?
Um, I find that when someone pitches me an idea for a show, 90% of whether I want to get involved comes from like the first minute of the description. Which is a little bit of a dangerous game because it can sometimes be misleading. But when Shay was like, I want to do a show about a 16-year-old kid who doesn't have a dad but also has five dads, I was like, yep, okay, great. Like, I get it. I know what that is. I understand how it would be funny. You give five actors really specific personalities that are, like Shay said, like in conflict with each other, but they're all branches on the same tree. And then you give him a totally kick-ass mom who is like kind of in her own way a superhero, who is the glue that holds the whole family together and is unquestionably the alpha character among the adults. It all just sort of fit together. Like I think we had this image. One of the first images that popped into my brain was we were talking about the carnival episode, which is the second
Mm-hmm.
episode, and I was like, this is essentially a show about being 16 years old and what like that feeling of like I'm 16, I'm still a kid, but I'm almost an adult, and what does that mean? And I had this image of these kids running around the carnival in slow motion, just being kids, like
Mm-hmm.
being happy kids without a care in the world who were living like a fantasy of like what would you how fun would it be to be locked in a carnival alone with your three best friends, or in Primo's case, his two best friends and the girl he has a crush on. And so it starts with like really good three-dimensional characters, and then it moves into this world where you start seeing images of them or imagining scenes with them, and just knowing in your gut somehow that like yeah, that's good, that's going to work, that's going to be compelling. So that's really it. It's not rocket science. It's sort of like, are the characters three-dimensional? Do they have
Mhm.
interesting inner lives? Do they relate to each other in interesting ways? Are they funny together? Like, and what we found early on is because the characters are so well defined, you put any two of them or any three of them into a scene together, and you're like, "Yep, I know how they're going to talk. I know how it'll be
Mhm.
funny. I know I." You just start to see the whole thing. So it was just like a no-brainer to me. It was like, yeah, this is a great idea. Like this is a simple, clean, good idea for a comedy show, and it proved to be that.
Yeah, and Shay, it is one of those shows that, like, yes, it's about this specific family, but I think if anyone has a large family, it is incredibly relatable. Like, I have a big Italian family, and I was like, oh yeah, we never told my grandma her sauce was bad. We all just like sucked it up. Like, it was just like stuff like that where I was like, oh yeah, like anyone who has people who think that they are like their parents, even though their actual parents are right over
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
can relate to this show.
yeah.
But it is like it is Primo show, and it is so nice kind of seeing just like this kid struggling to like do normal kid things, like talk to the girl he likes. And with a character like that, was it always your goal kind of just to make him in the midst of this large family who are all full of characters be quote unquote the straight man of that family, because he is kind of just like oddly enough the one beacon of like reason in some of these situations that we see them in.
Yeah, that was exactly what we were hoping to do, what we were trying to do. When we made the character descriptions early on, the I think a line that stood out to me always was like he's 10% nervous about everything, right? So he's not like super neurotic or anything,
Mm-hmm.
but it's always in there a little bit. And because he has that in him, that turns him into somebody who like if a person is telling him some ridiculous thing, the uncles are just throwing information at him. He's never just completely dismissive. He's always like, maybe that is a good idea. Like I should consider that, no matter how ridiculous it is. When one of the uncles is telling him, "Oh, the way like you impress a girl is you just pick her up, just get her off the ground," and he's like, "Oh, is that should I do that, guys? Like, should I?" You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it just becomes more fun. I remember Mike was talking to us about that early on. He used Ron Swanson as an example when they were doing the Parks and Rec episode, and they were going to have like Ron was going to be forced into having to solve a puzzle or help solve a puzzle,
Yeah,
and
I know exactly what you're talking about.
right, and when it became and when they turned it so that he really liked it, it just was so much more fun. Like, oh, let's
Mm-hmm.
just do that all the time. Like, Rafa should really like the outfit he wears to the carnival. It's more fun that way. Rafa should really like this. The uncle should really like
Mm-hmm.
that. Like, it just it informs so much of the show is that they're all just into all of the stuff that they're doing, and even when they're not, they're still gonna do it together.
Yeah, and I think, and I know for a fact that you've talked about this before, Mike, but I want to ask both of you the when it comes to comedy, like I know it's annoying when someone does an improv line that is better than what's written. Famously, big the Chris Pratt connectivity line, but I'm thinking of like in this show in particular, there's a scene with the uncles that I was like howling at, and I was just like, oh, this is one of those that feel like I know it was written, but it feels like you guys trusted an actor to deliver this joke in a way that like felt organic, which is when they're talking about like I forget which uncle it was, but they were talking about the TV or the movie references to his butthole. And it was just like every time I said it, it just got funnier because it was like, that doesn't make any sense, but like I get it.
Yeah.
How do you, as creatives though, trust like this line seems wild on paper, but that actor's going to deliver it versus like, yeah, I'm going to let them play around with this scene and have a little bit of fun and see what comes organically.
Well, I would say first of all, it's not annoying at all when an actor
I love it.
improvs.
I
It's
love
the best.
it.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm still to this day annoyed about that Pratt line, not because it was funnier, but because I'm annoyed that someone is so talented that he can improvise a line that's better than something I could write. That's annoying to me. But it's not annoying for the show. It's great for the show. Like when that
Yeah.
like Greg Daniels used to say about scripts, like these aren't poems. We're not chiseling them into rock in some kind of like at the base of the the Acropolis or something. These are blueprints. Like you
Mm-hmm.
work really hard on it. You write the best jokes you can write, but then after that, if an actor embodying the character that you created improvises something that's better, you'd be a fool not to embrace it. You'd be like, it would be insane. I mean, if our rule on The Office was Steve Carell is never allowed to improvise, the show would have been like 70% less funny. Like that would have been, and same with Amy Poehler and Chris Pratt
Mhm.
and Nick Offerman and John Krasinski and Rainn Wilson. Like these are world class actors who are creative and funny, and many of them are writers and and highly trained at improv. Like every time we have a show, I'm sure this will be true if Primo lasts long enough. At some point, I'm gonna say we need Jason Mantzoukas for this part, and the reason you get Jason
I
Mantzoukas is
love
because he's the greatest improviser in the world, and you're part of what you're getting with him is like no one can play this part except him because he's the only lunatic who's good enough to do it. And
that.
also, when he is jumping in with both feet, he will come up with stuff that's on his own that is better than what you've written. That's the dream. That is the absolute dream. And as far as your question goes, like I would say only you create the character in your head, you cast the character to the best of your ability with the person who's the funniest in the audition, and then that begins a feedback loop where once you know who the actor is and once you know how they play the part, you start dreaming almost in the voice of that actor character combination. It's no longer
Mhm.
abstract, it becomes real. And so you get Johnny Ray Diaz, let's say, to play Rolly, and that's a different version of Rolly than the one that we had maybe imagined at the very beginning, but it's a better one because he has this sort of happy, goofy, guileless, kind of like dopey attitude about his role, and so suddenly you start dreaming of lines in his voice that is a combination of the character you designed and the actor who's playing it. And again, that is the dream. The dream is that you see the actors that you've cast, you see how they play the part, and then you're like, "Ooh, this would be great." That section in the yeah, have you watched all of them? I don't know if you've seen all
Yeah, I
the
have now, but but back then I was like, I have to go out, but I want to watch the rest
Well,
of
the
it.
scene that my favorite scene the whole season is in the finale when they have the discussion about when they're asking about Sammy the bus driver, and they
Mhm.
just start asking questions about buses. Like I think that scene should be 12 minutes longer. I never would have gotten if the whole episode had been those idiots asking questions about buses and bus driving, I would have been completely happy. And that scene is only possible after you've done all the work of creating the characters and the actors have done all the work of really embodying them, and you get to say like, okay, now we have this game that they're all playing, which is they get lost in the discussion of Drea and her new boyfriend, and they just are curious about buses and they start asking questions about buses. Like that could go on for so long, and I would be totally happy. And we've written all of season two. It hasn't been ordered yet, but we've written all of the scripts, and there's like six more scenes in season two where we were like, all right, this scene is going to go on way too long, and it's going to be really delightful because now we know who these people are and how they talk and how they're funny, and then it's just you give that cast and those characters and those scenarios to a good writing staff,
Mhm.
and it's just pure joy.
Yeah, I thank you guys so much for talking with me today. I can't wait for people to. I'm so happy that this show exists. Like I was watching it just like very excited because it filled that little hole in my heart, and I was like, "Yay! There's another show I can just obsessively watch and quote and see online." But thank
That's
you
so
guys so
good.
much, and I hope we do get season two. And I can't wait to see how audiences meet Rafa and Primo and the whole see Primo and watch the whole family come together.
Thanks,
Thank you
Rachel.
so much.